Good morning, everyone. Welcome to my monthly uh, Redox for Docs presentation. I've got a guest this morning who I'll introduce here in a minute, but we will be taking for some, a relatively deep dive into redox and redox signaling and how this technology came about and what it's doing for your body. For others, it may be not so deep. It depends on your understanding of biology and physiology. So this will be a discovery for many of you about redox and ASEA. So in case you're new to this, I've been a physician for a long time. I'm board certified in internal and emergency medicine, and I have a master's in preventive medicine as well. I'm an entrepreneur and educator. I'm a family guy. I've also done a whole lot of things in my life, including high altitude climbing and whitewater rafting and bicycling. In fact, we're going skiing for a week here as soon as we're done with this webinar. And I've served on the ASEA Medical Professionals Board now for about 6 months. Foster, you want to brag about yourself a little bit?
No. Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here. Love working with you guys. Cross-line love. Always love that stuff. I'm in my 38th year as a chiropractor here in Paterson, New York, which most of you have never heard of. I got my bachelor's at Syracuse University. I did a lot of gymnastics back in my history. I was a musician. I'm an applied kinesiologist, so I use the body as a diagnostic tool. I achieved one of the highlights of my career, became a hospital chiropractor. I did that for many years. I've been blessed to be with the ASEA Medical Professionals Board. Now this is my 6th year, and it's a great honor to have that entrusted in me that I get to teach those like you on this webinar. So thanks again for having me, Dick.
Thank you very much. And Foster and I have become pretty close friends through our affiliation with ASEA. And I think we really share these purposes to better people's lives and be a force for good in the world, really to help people enrich both their health and their lifestyle. And for the purposes of this call, to educate healthcare professionals about redox and really to inspire others to live lives filled with purpose and meaning. And hopefully for you healthcare professionals, this call will give you an additional tool that you can use to help your patients. So we're going to go through this this morning and try to share with you the journey that Foster and I have taken as we've become redox specialists. You know, in the beginning, I think Foster and I were both wondering what the heck is going on here. We were hearing about and we were seeing people have some amazing benefits for their health, talking to them and wondering what the heck is this all about? You know, the science of redox biology and physiology 8 to 10 years ago, Foster, where do you think that was? Because I don't think we knew science was developing, but I don't think in terms of people using it to benefit their health, there's really much going on. How did you see that?
Upon it, thank goodness it's actually a network marketing product. So I got to hear about it from a guy in California. And he had no idea what it was. He said it was an athletic product and he heard it was a miracle. And he didn't send me anything really to research. So I just said, sure, send me some stuff. And sure, I'll join your business for $30 at the time. And we just wanted to see what it would do for us athletically, because that's all we knew, because Terry and I worked out, but Terry was really ill for many years. And as we saw Terry's improvement, and she's tried to convince me that this improvement that she had that she couldn't get anywhere else might be from this product. I started to do the research and it was scant at best. And so the only thing I really could find was Dr. Gary Samuelson's book, The Science of Healing Revealed. I thought that was a good place to start. And after I got through half of that book, I said, this is why you feel better. This is why I feel better. And I think this is going to change the world. So I started looking on PubMed.gov and talk about scant. There was almost nothing there. I think there were 1,000 studies to date. That was 10.5 years ago. And it was marginal. And, you know, the smoke was there. The smoking gun was there to see that, this might be a real something, but there was so little back then. It was really based mostly on anecdotal evidence and people saying their lives were changed. And then as a doctor using it in the hospital, as I saw people's lives change that had no shot of changing, that's when I just researched this virtually every day.
Yeah, that's where I was. I think I came in a couple of years after you, and there were a few more references on PubMed.gov, but not a whole lot. I think there were, maybe a few over 1,000, but nothing like we have now. But I had a little bit of trepidation when I realized that we were talking about a technology that involved mitochondria and Krebs cycles and reduction, oxidation, electrons moving around. Wow. I'm thinking, what the heck, do I have to go back to medical school to understand this? And that proved not to be, but we're going to do some of that this morning because I want you to really understand that there is some real basic cell physiology and science behind this. But we're going to talk about how do our cells employ redox molecules in health and disease. We're going to talk at a little bit of length about the gene study that ASEA did to get a better idea of how this product actually works, a mechanism of action. And then we'll talk about the implications for this technology and what it can really do for people. I want to start though by giving our standard disclaimer so we don't get into trouble with any regulators. This product is not intended to cure, heal, or treat anyone. It's not designed for that. It's designed to help your body do that. And so anything that Foster or I might say that implies that we're talking about curing or healing, just take that with a grain of salt because we're clinicians and that's just kind of sometimes how that we talk. But both Foster and I were delving into something new, a new area of knowledge. It wasn't just new for us, it was new for most of the world. And when you're looking at knowledge, somebody told me a long time ago something that really opened my mind. He says, knowledge is a kind of a fickle thing. And it falls into three categories. And the first one is what we all know, and that's what we know. And most of us think we know a lot, but we also, most of us, if we're honest, know that we don't know a whole lot more. But then there's another category, and this is a category that can get us into trouble if we don't realize it, but also it's a category where we can have major breakthroughs. And that's the category of what we don't know, we don't know. And I think for many of us and many people across the globe still, redox signaling and redox communication really falls into that latter category. So what if you have a question? Use the chat for that. We're not going to have time to answer all your questions. And don't ask questions about specific diseases. Like I said, we don't talk about curing, healing, or fixing certain diseases. And if we can't answer your questions at the end of this presentation, I'll be sure to answer them in next month's presentation, or we may have a little bit of time at the end to answer a few of them. One that often comes up is if I'm convinced this is good for me and helping contribute to my long-term improvement, how long do I have to use this? And the simplest answer to that is, well, how long do you want to stay in that improved condition? And I think you can figure out the answer, and that is Foster and I have been taking this for 8 and 10 years respectively, and we wouldn't dream of stopping. So we're going to dive into the science and technology of ASEA Redox. ASEA Redox is the foundation for all healthy cells. It's really a requirement for healthy cells. So, all disease, the root cause of all disease is really cellular dysfunction. And trying to help those suffering from serious challenges without first addressing their deficiency in redox signaling, it's kind of like trying to play darts with your hands behind your back. And Foster convinced me one time that was a good way to play darts until I noticed that his hands were free and full of darts.
Worked for me.
Or it's a little bit like playing ping pong with a blindfold. I've tried that too. I heard that ball hit the board, but where the heck did it go? And oftentimes what we're doing in medicine is trying to fix problems that aren't fixable with medicines, because many times the medicines that we prescribe are simply covering up symptoms and not necessarily addressing the root cause of illness. In fact, if I were to go through the physician's reference, which is a large book, we don't use the book anymore, it's all online, but it's a huge amount of information because there's a huge amount of drugs in there. And I would say that probably 90% of them largely address symptoms as opposed to addressing causes. So Foster, could you read this statement that we all love dearly about how important redox is?
Happy to. I have it memorized, but I'll read it anyway. Redox is the single greatest health science breakthrough of our lifetime. This technology has the potential to spearhead the greatest advances of health we have ever seen, and Dick and I have seen them.
Were you a little bit like, is that in the beginning, were you kind of like, maybe that's over the top? And how's your belief in that statement developed or changed over the years?
So I'm a skeptical New Yorker. And when I started hearing the claims and I read this quote, my first thought was, yeah, sure, been said before, heard it before. You know, I've heard a million products in my practice over the years. And I didn't really believe this for a second until I got more and more, it was objective information. As I saw my patients change and I saw objective tests change, I couldn't disagree anymore. And now my belief is over the top. You know, everybody I talk to, every one of my patients, they all know about ASEA, whether they choose to take it and be well or not. It's my conviction in this science and this product could not be any bigger. I know this is changing the world and will change it for many, many, many years to come.
Absolutely. I was same as you. I thought, you know, the single greatest breakthrough, but I'm firmly behind this and have been for a number of years. To start in a way to get you to understand how foundational this is, I want you to think really small. I want you to think like electron microscopy small about your body, because our body is made up of atoms or molecules that come together to form cells, and our body is made up of trillions and trillions of cells. So you can imagine how many of these atoms and molecules are involved. And usually we think of molecules primarily as building blocks of those cells. But it's also important to think of molecules as biochemistry that provide the function that happens in those cells. It's important to think of molecules as sources of information processing. Think of molecules as a primary means of communication between cells, because that's really what we're going to spend most of the rest of this morning talking about. And also, don't underestimate these redox signaling molecules, because they're really the foundation for all healthy functional cells. Exactly what is life? I mean, we could argue about it, but the physiologic definition of life is really a continuous complex series of chemical reactions. I mean, that's what makes us alive. And they're supervised by a very complex genetic code. And they're coordinated by the interactions of a group of molecules that we call redox signaling molecules. And by the way, Foster and I didn't think up that title. That actually comes from the cell physiologists and biologists. It's a great way to describe this group of molecules, however. But all of this biochemistry, I mean, I can't even put a number to the number of chemical reactions that are going on inside my body and your body right now. There's probably a few less in Foster's body. I've kind of noticed that about him. But with all of those interactions going on, what the heck is in control? Because if there wasn't some very fundamental foundational control of all of that, there'd be chaos, and we certainly wouldn't be sitting here having a webinar. In fact, there would be no webinar technology. So what's the magic? What makes it work? Well, it's information processing and communication. And as it turns out, redox signaling via redox signaling molecules is the primary mode that our cells use to communicate. I'll go ahead and cover the science stuff because I know, I probably have a little more background in that, and Foster sometimes struggles with details like what is oxidation and what is reduction. In fact, I
hope the people on the webinar understand that that your penchant and proclivity towards sarcasm is a redox signaling event as well. I'd like to congratulate you.
That is true. And feel free to rib me a little bit too.
I promise.
I hate to be on a Saturday morning event like this and not get a little feedback.
You may regret that, but I'm happy to.
So reduction and oxidation, it just describes a very foundational interaction that molecules have. It's all about electrons moving from one molecule to another. When that happens, energy is either released or consumed. So it's a very important part of human physiology. And just to give you some definitions, oxidation is the loss of an electron, and a molecule that loses electrons is a reductant. Reduction is the gaining of an electron, and that molecule is called an oxidant. And now you're totally confused. I am too, but let's get through these definitions so that we can move on. Now, when we talk about our cells and our cells taking food, proteins, carbohydrates, and turning it into energy, that's called cellular respiration. It's not breathing. It's cellular respiration because it involves oxidation and involves oxygen. I came to really understand how important oxygen was the first time I climbed a big mountain. And when I was on Everest without supplemental oxygen, I really sought out those rare oxygen molecules in the air, and they're pretty far between. But cellular respiration uses oxygen to release energy from the food that we eat, and it produces redox signaling molecules as a byproduct of that. So we're going to talk about that byproduct. So oxidation, in terms that you might understand a little bit better, is gaining an atom of oxygen. We have to use, we rely on oxygen to stay alive, and it's because of this cellular respiration. So oxidation is gaining an atom of oxygen, and reduction is donating an atom of oxygen. So if you look at that simple equation, water plus oxygen equals H2O2, which happens to be hydrogen peroxide. That's a coupled redox reaction. Going from left to right, it's oxidation. Going from right to left, it's reduction. And the Krebs cycle is all about this. That's where your food gets turned into energy. And it's nothing more than moving electrons around, producing that cellular energy. ATP also produces these redox signaling molecules and reactive oxygen species and CO2. And so that your lungs are all about bringing in oxygen and getting rid of the CO2. So what are antioxidants? Foster, you want to spend a couple of minutes just kind of going through some of these bullet points about what antioxidants were, because you and I spent a lot of our career recommending antioxidants to people until ASEA came along and we realized that this is a much more powerful way to improve people's health.
Absolutely. And kudos on that explanation. I don't know that anybody's ever gone into that much depth, and I hope that everybody followed it, and there will be a quiz at the end. But essentially, absolutely, we are just moving around pluses and minuses, and that's how humans function. So what is an antioxidant? So when my wife was ill before ASEA, she took tons of antioxidants because we wanted to decrease this oxidation thing, and she still didn't get better. So what do? They act as electron donors to neutralize these free radical molecules. By the way, free radicals kill you over time, like ROS, this reactive oxygen species. They help to control oxidative stress in our cells, which is essentially the rusting of a cell. Just like your car oxidizes and rusts, that's what can happen in your cells. So there are native antioxidants and there are plant-derived antioxidants. I'm sure we're going to talk more about native in a minute. Previous emphasis was always on controlling this reactive oxygen species. The older research shows that that was terrible. We know now that that's different. Oxidant, to minimize, so previous emphasis was on controlling the oxidants only to minimize damage to DNA, et cetera. And that was old thinking and overrated. And all the newer research says, yeah, that's important, but there's another big piece to that puzzle.
Yeah, I think if we were to go back 10 or 15 years ago, and anyone asked us about reactive oxygen species, i.e. free radicals, we just said, yeah, those are bad actors. But now we know that that's not necessarily true. And in fact, what used to be called the Society for Antioxidant Biology and Medicine I think it was around 2014 or 2015, actually changed the name of their organization to the Society of Redox Biology and Medicine, because at about that time, we were starting to understand that antioxidants were not the whole story. And in fact, we could overdo it with antioxidants. So what is a reactive oxygen species, a free radical? What are these things? Well, are they good? Are they bad? Are they ugly? Are they terrible? Well, they can be all of the above, depending on the concentration and where they are in the cell and where the cell cycle is in terms of redox. But not all reactive oxygen species are free radical damaging sorts of molecules. And it's complicated. And the scientific investigation into the beneficial role of these molecules, we will talk about a little bit, but it really has changed most of our minds about how we feel about these molecules. And understanding, and in fact, many of the redox signaling molecules that we're going to talk about are indeed reactive oxygen species, and they're necessary for cellular communication. And we now know that they're normal and necessary, and they're revolutionizing our understanding of health and disease. Now, I'm going to sprinkle through here a number of references that I pulled from PubMed. And we're not going to read them because it would take forever, but mostly I want you to just look at the titles. And if you want one of these abstracts, just let me know, or go to pubmed.gov and find it. They're pretty easy to find. But here we're talking about, let me move this. We're talking about free radicals on antioxidants and the physiologic effects of those molecules on physiology and human disease. Here we have free radicals in the physiologic control of cell function. Very, very important. Signal transduction by reactive oxygen species. Again, very important function in the cell. So these reactive oxygen species don't just act as free radicals that damage DNA and proteins and that sort of thing. They serve a very useful purpose. Reactive oxygen species in homeostasis and cell signaling. And last but not least, with regards to reactive oxygen species, the golden mean of healthy living at the cellular level. These are important molecules that contribute to your cellular health in huge ways. So we're going to get into redox signaling molecules. So now and most of these, or many of these, are indeed ROS. There are also reductants. There's oxidants and reductants, and combined, those are what we refer to as redox signaling molecules. So let's look at a couple of references from PubMed about that. I mean, here's an overview of the mechanisms of redox signaling. And I put all of these references in here so that you understand that it's not just these mad scientists, Dr. Foster and Dr. Walker, that are talking about these molecules. This is a very active area of research, and it's important for you to understand that. I'm getting all these notes about people adding to the call. Right now, my forward thing is not working. My slides are in advance here, Foster. Give me a second to try to figure that out.
It's okay. Usually most chiropractors can figure it out a little bit quicker, but I trust you.
I know I'm pushing the button, but I'm reminded of the monkey pushing the button so a food tidbit will drop into my cage, but it's not working.
What about one of those?
Yeah. This is.
Dan Doyle says, stop sharing and share again.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Dan.
Dan. He probably knows what to do because he's not a medical doctor.
Didn't work. Let me try it again.
What about if you hit one of these two?
Let me try this first.
And you can feel free to blame me, Dick.
Yeah, I've never had this problem when I didn't have you on as a guest, right? You jinxed me.
I've been a
No.
goat my whole life.
Okay, we got it. Nancy fixed it.
Of course you did.
My go-to IT person. Thank you, Nancy.
Terry and I always say between the two of us, as long as we equal one genius, we're good.
There you go. So redox signaling molecules, facts about redox signaling molecules. Foster, I think you're well equipped to handle this, and they're probably tired of hearing me talk.
Well, not for another couple of minutes. So these are facts about reactive molecules. So they're byproducts of aerobic metabolism, which is what Dick illustrated beautifully, formed in the mitochondria, naturally occurring in every single cell, small molecules of 3 to 4 atoms only. They're naturally very short-lived, very fleeting. They're easy to make. They're very difficult to stabilize. And it's an area of intense research, as is evidenced by scholar.google.com and pubmed.gov. Again, it's just exponentially increasing every year, the research that's going on.
It is amazing. If the searches that we used to do and come up with hundreds, and we would jump up and down when it went over 1,000 references. Now there are thousands, like 10, 15, 20, 30 thousands of references when we search different subjects that have to do with redox signaling. Redox signaling molecules, health at the cellular level. This is what it's all about. They play a critical role in regulating all major body systems. They regulate and activate and control genetic expression. It's important to understand that as we age, and we'll cover aging here in a minute, but as we age, we lose the ability to produce these molecules in our cells, and that can result in many, many problems, because when communication breaks down, lots of bad things start to happen. And one of the main things that causes problems is that regulating gene activity with redox signaling keeps that communication strong. And when you don't have enough of these molecules, that can become a problem. Now, some of you may be scratching your head and say, yeah, but Dr. Walker, you're talking about molecules. What kind of molecules? Well, if you look at the top line on this slide, you'll see an example of 4 different redox signaling molecules: superoxide, hydrogen peroxide, hypochlorous acid, nitric oxide. Some of these have weird names, but I can tell you that they're all present in your body, working to transmit information. And if they weren't, you would be in trouble. So this is cellular communication. Redox signaling is a scientifically documented mechanism by which our cells communicate. All living organisms use these, and they're essential to normal physiology. A very wide range of biochemical and physiologic processes depend on this signaling to happen. And they literally regulate every system in your body. Not one, not just one, not your skin, not your lungs, not your heart, but every one of those systems. So that beautiful picture on the right-hand side is a bottle of ASEA Redox. And it's the first and only supplement where you can add redox signaling molecules to your body to work at that cellular level. A few facts about redox signaling molecules. Foster, could you cover some of these? And then we'll move on to some maybe more exciting topics.
Absolutely. Although, every page, I've been hanging on every one, and they're all exciting to me, but that doesn't mean much. So is ASEA safe? It's proven to be as safe as water. You can't have a side effect from it, which is pretty awesome. So everybody can take it. Are there any side effects, allergies, or toxicity? The answer is 0. There are no side effects, allergies, or toxicity. For all of you science people, which is lots of you, no cytotoxicity, endotoxicity, neurotoxicity, or histamine reaction. It's really safe. Can everyone take it? Yes. Contraindications? No. Age limitations? No. Whether you're a newborn, whether you're 120, it is what your body functions with, and you need it, and everybody should be taking it. Does it interact with any medications? Absolutely not. None. It just makes everything in the body work better. How do we know that our body takes advantage of the extra redox molecules in ASEA? Because everybody that we see that drinks it for long enough and they take enough of the volume, we see that things improve. So whether it's sleep or it's energy or many, many things, we're not going to talk about medical conditions, but you just keep taking it and you're just going to keep seeing improvement. And a side story that I know Dick wants me to tell is that Dick Walker was sitting right on that couch over there and said, I have this blank and I haven't seen a change. And what do you think? And I said, well, what would you tell everybody? Take more, take it longer, and let's see what happens. And it happened. So it's all about being consistent, being persistent, and just trust. Tens of thousands of published studies. This stuff is powerful. It can hurt you, and just drink it and get everybody you love to drink it as well.
Absolutely. Thank you. And I think on this slide, this is my answering frequently asked questions slide. So hopefully those of you who were in the chat asking about toxicity and all that sort of thing, we've already answered that for you. And here are a couple of other important questions to answer when you're supplementing or to know the answers to when you're recommending this as a supplement. How might redox signaling actually enhance your health? We're going to talk a little bit about that. And we're going to look at what the science is talking about. What implications can we get from the science? We'll talk about that. How many are proclaiming that this is the single greatest breakthrough, and we've already covered that. Foster and I are 100% in on that. If that's true, why don't more people take it? Well, because most people have never heard of it. And you can help us as a health professional to get out there and share this information with the people who you know and care about, and just to see what sort of improvements they're going to achieve with regular, consistent use of redox signaling. Safety we covered. Why do I need it? Well, let's talk about that over the rest of the presentation. Aging and redox is an important thing to look at. You know, for every 10 years of life, we lose about 10% of the production of these molecules. And as redox signaling molecule production decreases, we start to see a progressive increase in all chronic diseases. I don't think there's anybody who would deny the fact that as we get older, we see more and more problems with their health. Now that we can restore a more useful level of redox signaling through supplementation, we can have a significant impact. When you think about it, the most common risk factor and probably the most significant risk factor for all chronic disease is cellular aging. And if we're going to make an impact on that, and if you're going to have an impact on your health as you get older, the single greatest thing you can do is to try to slow down that progressive decline, which is to a great extent because of the decrease in redox signaling molecules. Age does significantly decrease redox signaling production. It impairs our ability to control all that biochemistry. It decreases our epigenetic signaling, and we're going to talk a little bit about that specifically. It decreases our ability to repair cellular damage. It decreases our ability to replace damaged and dying cells. You know that our body sheds or eliminates 100 million cells a day. And if you can't keep up with that loss, you end up getting sick, you end up shrinking, you end up not being the healthy individual that you were 5 or 10 years ago. Autophagy is a scientific word for cleaning out the garbage that your cells accumulate over time. It's an ongoing process. The problem is that it's very dependent on redox signaling. And if you don't have an efficient, effective redox signaling system, then that debris accumulates. And this gets at the question that I often am asked, is ASEA a detoxing type product? We don't so much talk about detoxing. We talk about this process of cleaning house, this autophagy. It's a very important part of aging healthily, and redox signaling molecules are very important in this area. And the other thing that happens with age that you don't want to have and that you need to try to counteract naturally as much as you can is the decrease in immune protection from infections and cancer and autoimmune problems that happen with advancing age. So aging is a problem. Can we do anything to improve it? Well, yes, we can. We can change the focus from treating to preventing and supplementing. Each of these chronic diseases are more of a problem if we don't take care of ourselves. Things like cardiovascular disease, diabetes, cancer, COPD. And I'm going to show you some references from PubMed that have significance for all of these. But consider aging as your single greatest risk factor for disease. And the aging process, as we know it, starts in your late teens, early 20s. It doesn't wait till you're 50 or 60. It starts much earlier in life than most of us recognize. So let's go through a few of these references that have to do with redox signaling and aging. Let me admit this person. Redox signaling, neurotransmission, and cognitive function. Do people sometimes have trouble with their memory as they get older? Well, it could be a problem with redox signaling. A number of other references, if you look at some of these slides down in the lower left-hand corner, we've been talking about the number of articles that are in PubMed about certain things. If you look at the lower left-hand corner of that slide, it says that this is the 7th article out of 34,427 references when I just went in there and searched under redox signaling and aging. Reactive oxygen species mediating signaling in aging. Again, they're not all bad. They mediate messages. Redox biology and neurologic function and dysfunction with aging. The evolution for free radical aging. We've been talking about that. There's a ton of information out there about these reactive oxygen species, both being beneficial as well as the older understanding when we used to think that they were all harmful. Reactive oxygen species, cellular redox systems, and apoptosis. That's getting rid of dead and dying cells that are hanging around too long, causing problems. Because if you don't clean house and get rid of those cells, they release all kinds of inflammatory chemicals that cause chronic inflammation. And redox control of cell death. So redox is very, very important, both in both causing the aging process and also now that we can supplement, perhaps ameliorating some of those effects. But this technology will, without a doubt, historically, we'll look back and we'll say, when we were telling people about how redox can help ameliorate the problems with aging, we'll know that this was a big part of this scientific breakthrough, because this science will change how we feel about aging. And if you're not a believer in this, unfortunately, the after picture is hidden under my photo. But Rosie is a prime example of what happens when you supplement with redox. Even if you don't start till you're 84, she had a wonderful result. And most of her improvement, I can only say, is primarily due to the effects of anti-aging. Aging and chronic inflammation. I made a little bit of a reference to that, but this is a huge new branch of age-related research and research into what we call immunosenescence. That means the decline in our immune defenses as we age. Foster, you want to say a couple of things about redox and redox homeostasis and balance?
Absolutely. So as we do more research on PubMed and Scholar.Google, you will see that if you start searching things like redox homeostasis and redox balance, and what kind of conditions we see with the loss of redox homeostasis, which is another term for balance, it's more than a clue. It's where science is going now. We have to look at not just nutrition and not just medicines, and we have to look at the redox balance and homeostasis, because our genetics, our epigenetics, it's things that we're exposed to, the things that we eat, that we don't eat properly. Those are all going to change our redox balance. And the more we can stay balanced and in redox homeostasis, the more those pluses and minuses, the reduction in oxidation, those things work the way they were designed, and then we can have a better present and a better. It's all about, this continuum of illness versus wellness. And we all want to stay in the wellness side, but illness is loss of wellness. And this is the most powerful wellness product any of us have ever seen.
Absolutely. Thank you. And one of the factors that really in aging, and remember, aging starts at a much younger age than you might think, is that chronic low-grade inflammation is a very highly significant risk factor for morbidity and mortality of all types. Let's take a look at some of the references that you might find in PubMed. Redox signaling, neuroinflammation, and neurodegeneration. You notice that as people age? Reactive oxygen species, the role in inflammation and lung disease, both a blessing and, if too many, a curse. Oxidative stress in chronic lung disease. We see a lot of people with chronic lung disease, and I'll bet you never thought that redox signaling played a role in that kind of dysfunction. This is being researched across the globe. This is just a couple of the universities here in the United States that are delving into the science of redox signaling and how it impacts our health. There is a ton of scientific validation. When Foster and I started, there was one little book on this topic, and now there are hundreds of books. And I'll just tease you a little bit by saying that I just wrote a recommendation about for someone who is writing a very excellent new book about redox signaling. I'm not going to say much more about it because it's still in the approval phase at ASEA, but I think you're going to love it because it's going to cover a lot of the science that we're talking about today. So again, a little bit more about ASEA Redox. It's unlike any other product. It's not a vitamin or a mineral. It's not an antioxidant. It's not a precursor of anything. ASEA Redox is made from very simple ingredients, pristine salt water that goes through an electrolytic process lasting about 3 days. And I think they've even shortened that up a little bit. And it creates what we call stabilized redox signaling molecules. Foster, how long do the redox signaling molecules last that all of our cells make?
Nanoseconds, I think.
That's not very long, is it? I mean,
Milliseconds.
Yeah,
Exactly.
we'd be hard pressed to put those in a bottle and send them out to people, wouldn't we?
Exactly. I've tried.
Yeah, I bet. I didn't even bother trying. I couldn't find a bottle small enough. But so what are redox signaling molecules? What is ASEA Redox? Well, it's a proprietary and patented combination of redox signaling molecules formulated specifically to safely optimize the physiologic signaling effects of redox molecules on cell biology. And I know from talking to the scientists and the production people at ASEA that this formula has changed and been improved and upgraded over the years to get maximum benefits from this signaling. And it's a patent protected. It's also protected by trade secrets, and it's made by a biotech company located in Pleasant Grove, Utah, called ASEA. What's the mechanism of action for these redox signaling molecules in ASEA? Well, ASEA said, well, let's try to figure that out. And they came up with a couple important questions that they wanted to ask. And we're going to talk about the gene study that they did. And one of those questions was, gee, could consuming ASEA Redox have epigenetic effects on cells that could explain some of the results that we're observing? And I'll show you why we asked that question when I show you some references in a second here. And if so, if it did have epigenetic effects, would it be possible to identify certain patterns of epigenetic influence attributable to supplementing with ASEA Redox? And last but not least, in the study that they designed, they also wanted to ask the question, how long lasting would those changes be? To address that question about, do I need to take ASEA for the rest of my life, or can I stop taking it after I notice that my body is behaving itself? So what about this whole epigenetic thing? Why did ASEA want to check out the epigenetics of cellular redox? Cellular redox, epigenetics, and disease. Redox regulation of common stability by effects of gene expression, epigenetic pathways, and DNA damage and repairs. These are important things, folks, and epigenetics has a major influence. redox basis of epigenetic modification from mechanisms to functional consequences. So epigenetics play a very important role in the health of our cells. And this study was designed to show whether or not drinking ASEA would make a difference. Foster, can you briefly explain the setup for this experiment, and then we'll go into some of the results?
Yeah, absolutely. So this was the game changer for many of us because it showed us what it is that we're actually doing and how deep this product is going. So we had 60 participants, 25 placebo, 25 active, and 10 control who didn't take anything. The active group drank ASEA Redox. The placebo group drank salt water. We had 41% male, 59% female, and their average age was 35. A perfect group to show whether our product worked or didn't work with genetic expression.
And one of the most important things I want to point out about the study design was that the average age of the people in this study was 35. It wasn't 65 or 75 or 85. So it wasn't set up to see what it would do for people like me. I'm ancient. I'll be 73 here in a couple of weeks. It was younger people to see what the effects would be with redox. And this is one of the things that really changed my mind about how early in life the aging process actually starts. So consuming redox, ASEA Redox, had an effect on a number of signaling pathways, but the ones that were statistically significant and the greatest were these 5. Let's take a look at one of these, just the EGR1 pathway, to give you an idea of how significant this is, because this one signaling pathway gene controls a number of physiologic functions. Look at that, NRF2, that's antioxidant production. We'll talk about that here in a second. Insulin signaling, nuclear receptor factors. I mean, there's some pretty important stuff here that we now know information processing with regards to these things is enhanced by ASEA. I want to just single out one of these, and that's the NRF2 gene, because remember we were talking about antioxidants and how important it was to take antioxidants. I had a bullet point in there about natural versus plant-based antioxidants. What we do know is that plant-based antioxidants were designed by what, Foster? Plants, right?
Exactly, Dr. Walker. Nicely said.
I know that was a loaded question, but the reason for that is that they work best in plants. And we've had to rely on those to get our antioxidant levels up, but we're not plants. We're not broccoli. If we eat too much, we might look like broccoli, but we're not broccoli. And so we rely on that NRF2 gene to stimulate the additional production of antioxidants when we have oxidative stress. Now, normally, before ASEA came along, if you wanted to increase your antioxidants, first you had to cause problem. You had to increase oxidative stress. You had to get injured or get sick, and then the body would start to make additional antioxidants. But we've been able to bypass that step, thank goodness. And simply by drinking ASEA, we now know that it upregulates the NRF2 gene and causes the additional manufacturing in your cells of native humanologic antioxidants, so to speak. I don't know if that's a word or not. I might have just created a new word. These are the kind of antioxidants that are going to give you the maximum beneficial effects of antioxidant protection. Don't take my word for it. Here's a whole bunch of different references about NRF and redox signaling that I pulled up on PubMed. Now, the 5 major areas, and if you got to go see patients, Foster, that's great. The 5 major areas that we saw and the millions of people that are affected that we know from this study was innate immunity, inflammatory problems, vascular health, digestive health, hormone modulations. These are big things. And we now know that one of the mechanisms of action of ASEA is to help improve signaling in those areas, improve immune system health, help mean inflammatory response, modulate hormone balance, all of these really cool things. So let's take a look at why we feel that we're really onto something here. Innate adaptive immunity and interplay with redox regulation in the immune response. That's pretty important documentation that we're onto something with this epigenetic signaling. Redox modulating agents in the treatment of viral infections, redox regulations of T cells. Are you starting to see how extra redox signaling molecules might be helping the immune system, might be helping those genetic pathways work even better? Here's some more references on the why redox signaling is important in cellular immunity. Nitric oxide, which is a redox signaling molecules in the immune response. Intercellular redox signaling as therapeutic targets for novel antiviral therapy. Redox, let me get rid of it. Redox regulation of T cell function, molecular mechanisms to promote human health. Redox signaling and macrophage function, another important type cell in our immune response. Redox reactive oxygen species and T cell signaling. Innate immune signaling and proteolytic pathways in the resolution or exacerbation of SARS, a very timely subject. Again, we're not claiming to cure, heal, or treat any particular disease, but I thought it was interesting that the study of redox is even gone to the point of looking at this whole problem that we're facing in society right now. So again, in review, what did this study show? It showed that drinking ASEA redox had a significant effect through the epigenetic pathways on these 5 major areas of human health. Let's look a little bit at that inflammatory business. Inflammatory bowel disease, mechanisms, redox considerations, and therapeutic targets. Potential role of antioxidant and anti-inflammatory therapies to prevent this virus that we're all dealing with. Again, I remind you, just drinking a significant, sufficient quantity of redox signaling molecules can improve your health in all these areas. Let's look at the cardiac area. Redox signaling in cardiac physiology and pathology, redox signaling of hypertension, redox signaling in pathophysiologic physiology. Phil, can you say that word, Foster? I'm having, my tongue's all tied up. Yeah, that's a tough one.
Pathophysiology of hypertension.
Thank you for that help.
Glad to add.
I need more molecules, I think. Improvement in the NRF2 in myocardial ischemia and reperfusion injury. That's talking about people who have had heart attacks, and our body goes into action to help prevent the problems that could develop as the blood supply is restored to that muscle that was without oxygen from the heart attack. Redox signaling and angiogenesis, that's also important in the recovery from myocardial injury. The role of redox signaling in epigenetics and cardiovascular disease, impaired vascular signaling, complications of obesity and diabetes mellitus. Are there a lot of people suffering from adult onset diabetes, Foster? You probably see them in your clinic all the time.
Tons and more every year.
And do you think redox signaling is part of that problem, but maybe also part of the solution for those people?
Yes, I think the ASEA solution can be the solution.
Oh, I like that.
Thank you very much. I'm trademarked. The answer is absolutely. It's an aging process. It's an epigenetic process. It's a genetic process, and that's the world we're in.
Redox regulation of cardiac hypertrophy. Wow, the cardiac implications for supplementing with redox signaling it was one of the largest categories when I went into PubMed. It had a huge number of references. What about gut health? Well, here's an article I came across. Redox signaling mediates the symbiosis between gut microbes and the intestine. So it is very important in intestinal health. Again, I'll remind you, these are the 5 areas that we now know our mechanism of action has a significant influence on your health. So let's focus a little bit on diabetes, because it's a major, major problem of disease in this country. Again, we don't cure, heal, or treat diabetes, but redox imbalance appears to contribute to diabetes. It also appears to contribute to one of the main problems that diabetics have, and that is diabetic retinopathy, where they lose their vision due to microvascular changes. And a lot of that involves redox signaling. Epigenetic regulation of redox signaling in diabetic retinopathy, a big one. Wound healing in diabetics, another big one. Diabetics have trouble healing wounds, especially on their lower extremities, and it leads to loss of toes and feet and lower legs. And Foster, I'm sure you deal with a lot of people who have had problems with infections due to circulation issues that diabetics have to deal with.
Absolutely true. And, using the gel topically, and I'm sure that you'll talk about it. It's amazing once you drink the product and get to the cause, and then you use the gel, which gets to the cause while helping the symptoms, is a wonderful, wonderful process to behold. You know what, Dick, I do have to go see patients.
Great.
I was honored to be here. What a great presentation. I'm so glad you recorded it. Thanks all for being here. And I trust that you will do as good a job as I would have had I stayed.
Thank you very much. We'll finish this up and then post it so you can watch the end of it.
Awesome. A real pleasure. Thanks everybody for being here. Trust Dr. Dick Walker.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So redox signaling is also very active in our musculoskeletal system that tends to deteriorate with aging. Here's a PubMed article on aging related to skeletal muscle dysfunction. Here's another one on muscle degeneration and the role of redox. Here's another one on how does our macula protect itself from oxidative stress? Many people as they age have trouble with their vision due to oxidative damage to that portion of their eyes. Redox is also important in exercise physiology. Are you starting to get the understanding that redox is pretty much important for everything that goes on in the human body? Redox homeostasis and exercise and epigenetics. Again, all of these areas and many others are impacted by the consumption of redox. I should note that what we found in that study is that when we looked at those same issues 6 weeks following the study, those patients or those study subjects were back to where they were before they started redox. So the benefits that we noticed in the gene study decline once you stop drinking ASEA. I think Foster mentioned the road to wellness. It's your journey. What you do makes a difference, and especially whether or not your body has a healthy level of redox signaling is important to add on top of exercise, proper diet, proper hydration, all of the other things that we know are beneficial. And we've talked a lot about looking at the causes of the health problems that people have instead of just focusing in on the symptoms. I've got a few before and after pictures real quick, and then we'll wrap this thing up. Redox skincare, Foster mentioned that, our Renew 28 product. I'm not going to have a lot of time. I'm not going to have much time to talk about that, but suffice it to say that the topical application of these molecules can have a huge benefit on the health of your skin by restoring a more youthful, vibrant skin. Here we have a thing on the end of this young lady's nose that she wasn't real happy about, and the application of Redox for a number of weeks allowed the body to take care of and eliminate that problem. Here we have a young man with an obvious outbreak of an inflammation activity on his skin, and after several months of applying the Redox gel, that problem resolved. I believe he was also drinking it. So let's look at what we can conclude from this. What's the bottom line? Well, knowing what we now know, we can better appreciate the many problems that develop in the absence of redox homeostasis. Remember, we talk about what we don't know, don't know. Now we know it. We can better understand that problems with redox cell signaling are a major cause of many, if not all, diseases. And we can now appreciate the huge array of potential benefits available from redox signaling molecule bio replenishment with the SIA redox. You might be asking these questions yourself, or your patients, I can assure you, might be asking themselves. You know, we're all made of cells. All disease and dysfunction have their origin in cells. All cells repair and replace themselves in the same way. Doesn't matter what kind of cell it is. They all depend on redox signaling. Is there any reason to suspect that you would be any different? And is there anything that prevents you from recommending this to your patients and perhaps trying it yourself? Remember when Foster talked about toxicities and all that sort of thing? There is no reason. This is by far the safest product that I've ever recommended to my patients. If you want more information, go to www.pubmed.gov. That's where all these references came from. If you want to look at the science that is specific to the ASEA Redox supplement, go to www.aseascience.com. And if you want to look at the types of experiences that people are having, there's two choices. You can go to redoxexperiences.com. The password is associates, or you can go to realredoxresults.com. Password is redox. Or there is a Facebook site that has hundreds of thousands of testimonies and stories, and that's See a Healthy Self. It's a private group, so whoever invited you to this call will have to add you to that group if you're not already on it. Dosage, 4 to 8 to 16 ounces a day, depending on age, health status, and how quickly you want to see results. You should take it at least twice a day. Some people take it up to 4 to 6 times a day. It's important to baseline your health with the tracker that comes in every case of ASEA. And I would recommend a minimal trial period if you're wanting to know what this might do for you of 3 to 4 months, and be willing to increase your dose and frequency during that time if you're not seeing a result. There is a 30-day money-back guarantee, but many times 30 days is not enough time for people to see a significant effect. How long does it take to work? Well, what we know is that a few people will see something in a few days or a week. About 25% of people will see something in that first month, about 50% in 2 months. And by the time we get out to 3 to 4 months, we're up to, 90 or better percentage of people who are realizing an improvement in their health. So I urge you to commit to at least a 90-day trial and be willing to increase the dosage and frequency if necessary, if you're not seeing any significant results in the first 4 weeks or so. ASEA is changing the world one cell at a time. Literally, it is changing your body. The longer that you take it, the more cells that are getting into a healthy redox situation. Thanks for watching. I know it was a lot of information, and we may be bordering on information overload here, but the takeaway I want you to have is that this is an important subject. This is an important supplement. This is an important technology, and it's very important that you take it under consideration and hopefully try this supplement to improve your overall health.